leadership of the party were arrested and taken to political detention. From that time onwards, Kenya remained a de facto single-party dictatorship from 1969 to 1982. 1982, when some of us wanted to form a political party, the regime then went to parliament and introduced a law to make the country a single party state de jure by introducing a constitutional amendment which is known as Section 2A that made it illegal to form any other political party. So from 1982, it remained literally a single-party dictatorship. But that is the reason why in that same year there was a coup attempt which did not succeed. But before that, a number of Kenyans were arrested and taken to political detention. Most of them were lecturers at the University of Nairobi. Mukarunganga, people like Professor Kamukunji, Professor Willy Mutunga, Dr. Professor Yugi Akongo, quite a number of university lecturers were arrested and detained, and the others, Koigo Amwere, Joja Nyona, were taken to political detention. So this situation persisted. Some of us were arrested in that year, 1982, after the coup attempt, and taken to political detention. And we stayed there for 6 years. Then in 1988, Kanu brought an amendment to his laws, saying that they were bringing what they called direct democracy, where there was a nomination process where people were lining up behind the candidate, and then the returning officer would count the voters who had lined up behind the candidate, and whoever got the highest number of votes, if you got more than 50% in total, you are automatically declared a member of parliament without having to go to the ballot. That process was abused, and many popular candidates were rigged at that stage, and therefore there was no real proper election in 1988. This now added momentum and anger to the movement for change. Among those people who had been rigged out were the late Kenneth Matiba and Charles Robia. So, come 1990, by that time I had been to detention 2 times. The 2 politicians, Kenneth Matiba and Charles Robia, on the 2nd of May 1990, addressed a press conference in which they said that Kenya, the time had come for Kenya to become a multi-party. That Kenyans wanted a multi-party system of government. They were condemned seriously as being ethnic chauvinists, anarchists, people who want to bring chaos in this country. They told that this country was not yet cohesive enough to become multi-party. It would take another 100 years before Kenya became a multi-party system. These were daydreamers. So the kind of machinery at that time set off now to demonize the 2 members of parliament, the 2 former members of parliament. And in the process, of course, a number of very inflammatory statements were made, even by some today politicians who are talking about democracy here. You go into the archives, you see the names and what they said at that time. So in the process, Kenneth Matiba came to look for me to arrange for a meeting between him and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, who is my father. I arranged the meeting, and then we met again. They met again with Mr. Rubia, Mr. Neko, and after lengthy deliberations, the decision was taken that they would be supported. At that same time, they sent the goons to Matiba's home the following day to attack his family. Matiba's wife was very badly wounded, Edith, and she was admitted to Nairobi Hospital, where we went to see her. After that, we, myself and Kenneth Matiba and Charles Obia made a statement which we said we would go to Kamukunji to ask Kenyans if they were ready for multi-party. And we do it on the day of the 7th of July, that year, 1990. 7th of July, 1990. So after making that statement, we then now went on to mobilize for the meeting at Kamukunji. But then, of course, the police officers came to block us from meeting each other. They were stationed in my office at Ajib House, Matiba's office, up there on Koinange Street, and Rubia's office, and Paul Mitchell's, and Gibson Kamau Korea's. On the 2nd of July, 1990, Matiba and Rubia were arrested and taken to detention. On the 4th of July, I was arrested and taken to detention. That same night, they arrested Gitobu Manyara, they arrested John Hamenwa, they arrested now Justice Mohammed Ibrahim. Paul Mwite went into hiding. Kamau Korea ran into American embassy and sought refuge. Keyote Murungi was in Ethiopia and went to America. But that's how it was. But the International Commission of Jurists came up and made a very powerful lobby for the release of Hamenwa and Manyara, and were released. As we remained in detention. And as you know, Rubia is the one who was first affected. He got a very serious infection. He was taken to hospital. Eventually, he nearly lost his vocal cords and was released. Matiba suffered a stroke in the detention and was removed and eventually brought to Nairobi Hospital, after which she was then taken to London for treatment. That completely undermined his health permanently. And these two people eventually died because of not old age at that time, but because of injuries they sustained while in detention. Many people, but in spite of our being detained, the Kenyan people braved it and came out in numbers to go to Kamukunji on the 7th of July, 1990. Many people were killed attempting to reach Kamukunji grounds at that time. So then, after we came out of detention, Then Ford was formed. We formed Ford. After forming Ford, again we get pressed and said we are going back to Kamukunji. Eventually, when I was targeted again, I was moved away from here and taken into exile. But our people braved it and managed to march all the way into Kamukunji. And you see the photograph in front page of Nation there today. You can see Martin Chikuku, James Orengo, Anyang Nyong'o, Masinde Muliro in the back of that truck guiding up to Kamukunji. That was not on Saba Saba, that was on the 16th of November 1991. But it's still the Kamukunji. That's why Kamukunji is very historical, the second liberation of this country. And that's why we celebrate Saba Saba. The fateful day on which Kenya's struggle for multi-party democracy took the most decisive turn is iconic and historical. It's a day rivaled only by the present day Mashujaa Day. Previously, Kenya celebrated that the recognition and remembrance of Saba Saba has not been consistent period history of 35 years. One moment it is important. The next moment it is not. On this 35th anniversary of Saba Saba, we decided to remember and to set the record straight on its significance, what it was and is, and what we ought to do with the foundation it laid for the country. Before that day, some patriotic Kenyans had demanded the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution. A number, including Kenneth Matiba, Raila Odinga, Mohamed Ibrahim, Toby Manyara, John Haminwa, and Charles Rubia, among others, were arrested and detained. It is quite unfortunate that some of the people we were fighting then and who sanctioned those arrests are trying to hide behind Saba Saba to advance their political fortunes. Some of them are alive today and now are masquerading as liberators. On the fateful day, July 7th, 1990, thousands of Kenyans tried to gather at the historic Kamukunji grounds to take stock of the state of the nation and chart a path of freedom forward. We decided that Saba Saba would be a march for political freedom and liberty, freedom of association, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, and a new democratic constitution founded on multipartyism. Kenyans wanted a fulfillment of the Kenyan dream. And good governance. That clarity of mission is what made Saba 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 is about the sacred and historic grounds of Kamukunji. It was not just another routine street protest in Nairobi or any other town. At Kamukunji is where they held the meeting in 1952. It is where Kanu's first rally was also held. It was also where the first Ford meeting was held after registration. Saba Saba had a single purpose: repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution and allow multi-party democracy in Kenya. Saba Saba had clear and known national conveners: Kenneth Matiba, Charles Rubia, bigger and powerful Forum for the Restoration of Democracy, FORD. FORD had a known nationally inclusive leadership: Raila Odinga, Philip Gachoka, Ahmed Bamariz, Salim Damwe, Asinde Muliro, George Ndenge, Kenneth Matiba, Charles Rubia, among others. Saba Saba was inclusive, democratic, and intergenerational. The old, the young, people in and out of the government, professionals, academics, trade unionists, civil society, women groups, and religious groups. All of them found their voice in what it stood for: a people's struggle for good governance, freedom, and equal opportunity for all. It was not one group against the entire nation. It was not community against that community, or of this age against that age. The movement stood for a peaceful and constitutional change of guard. That is the reason it focused singularly on amendment and later on the overhaul of the Constitution. These features are what made Saba Saba succeed. It is December 2nd, 1991. Question we have.
Kameme TV, Muthegi wa Ruriri. Na kisha moja kwa moja mtazamaji, basi nakupeleka hapa basi hadi kwa upande wa Japana. Kati huo magaidi wakaanza kuchokoza jamaa fulani alikuwa gaidi ya Zunyuizi na familia yake. Wewe, kwa nini mnakaa kwa meza yetu? Kwa nini mnakuja kukaa kwa meza yetu? Sasa jamaa wetu taikaoni kuona hivyo akaumwa. Mwanzo hapa mtazamaji ni kwa restaurant, sio kwa nyanya yako. Hii ni restaurant. Mtu analetwa hapa na pesa zake. Haya! Kaona akiwa na umama, akamuita kamama.
Hey! Kamama,
pigwa shock. God of Thunder. Akachomoka biguni, akakuingilia. Moyo wake unanyonywa. Moyo cheki venye na ambavyo jamaa anakaushwa. Na Hanzo Hasashi is crowd.